Two sides, one of freedom and one of slavery. Different ideals and views fighting for what they think is right. Today we are here to show you how the North and the South fought in the war, but mainly we are going to look at how they went about it and what they used against each other. Now we go to our correspondent Scott to tell you about the tactics of the Civil War. Scott? Go.
Alright, so let's talk about battle tactics. First, the first Battle of Bull Run. Technically, the Civil War started when the Confederate troops shelled Fort Sumter on April 12, 1861. But the first major battle was the first Battle of Bull Run, which always seems more important than the second Battle of Bull Run, most likely because the first Battle of Bull Run was the very first battle of the Civil War. Lincoln pushed for a quick end to the Civil War. Little did he know it would drag out for 4 long years. President Lincoln pushed his general, Irvin McDowell, to attack Confederate forces in Virginia near Bull Creek. The overall goal was to make quick work with the bulk of the Confederate Army. Of course, nothing went according to plan. McDowell made his advance as promised, but there was another advancement that was supposed to be made by General Robert Pattinson. He was supposed to pin the Confederate force led by Joseph Johnston in the Shenandoah Valley. General McDowell would then take care of his Confederate opposition led by PGT Beauregard. Patterson was known as a coward and was very timid and unaggressive. He was a veteran of the war in 1812 and earned the nickname Granny for his feeble efforts as general. He failed to hold Johnston's army, and from there, Johnston's army got marched to Bull Creek, where both Confederate forces smothered McDowell's Union force. Beauregard's army had a much less complicated way of attack. As McDowell's army approached, they sought to outflank their opponents. That's it. That's all they had. That was basically their whole plan. They said, we need to outflank our opponent. And they still won. I guess it just goes to show that more complicated plans lead to more error, especially if your general's nickname is Granny. The Union defeat led to McDowell's replacement with General McClellan. The Confederate generals were not recognized for their victory and left things between Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederate States of America, and these generals were left a bit sour.
Alright, now we can move into indisputably the most well-known battle in the Civil War. Yes, it's the Battle of Gettysburg. This was a battle between two of the more well-known generals in the war itself. This would be the Union General George Meade and the Confederates' famous General Robert E. Lee. This was a strategically interesting battle due to the overly aggressive style brought to the field by Lee and his Confederate troops. This was one of the first times in the war that the South was threatening to invade the Northern territories. This major battle started when Lee noticed that the supplies of his and his troops were dwindling, and he brought them to a halt at a small town in Gettysburg to settle and resupply. This is where on July 1st the two massive armies confront each other. Following the first day of battle, the Union troops occupied the coveted high ground, in which proved to be crucial for their victory further down the road. The Southern troops continued with their aggressive battle style while the North continued to hold Following the first day of battle, the Union troops occupied the coveted high ground, which proved to be crucial for their victory further down the road. The Southern troops continued with their aggressive battle style, while the North continued to hold their ground on the outskirts of the battle. On the third day of the battle, Lee decided to pull a very surprising and risky move to try and overwhelm the Confederates on their high ground. This was Pickett's charge. Robert E. Lee sent a total of almost 13,000 troops over open ground with no cover. Mass casualties were a result of this uncalculated move. Over half of the Confederate troops who took place in the charge died. Following this ballsy move and its utter failure, Lee ordered his troops to retreat from the field of battle. The Union's patience and defensive style of battle paid off in this tide-changing victory for the North.
The weapons of the Civil War. Now, to begin with, we're going to talk about the Model 1840 Cavalry Sabre, which was used by the Union Army. It was based on the 1822 French Hauser sword, or Hauser saber. Unlike its replacement, the 1860 Light Cavalry Sabre, the M1840 has a ridge around its cullion, a leather grip wrapped in wire, rather than grooves cut into the wood handle, and a flat, slotted throat. It is 44 inches long with a 35-inch blade and weighs roughly about 2.5 pounds. The M1840 was designed for slashing, and because of its heavy flat-back blade, was given the name Old Wristbreaker. It was adopted due to the Army's dissatisfaction with its predecessor, the Model 1833 Dragon Zig, the first cavalry sword adopted by the U.S. Army. The iron-hilted M1833 was based on a Napoleonic-era British sword used by heavy cavalrymen and reputed to wrap rubber like around a man's head and was only good for cutting butter. An ornate gilded version of this earlier sword was used by General Philip Sheridan during the Civil War. Sheridan had its sheath engraved with the battles he participated in. It was evident a replacement was needed, so in 1838 the U.S. Ordnance Department bought British, French, and Persian swords and field tested them. The troops overwhelmingly preferred the French saber, and a copy of it was put into production in 1844. A total of 2,000 were ordered, and by 1846, 600 were in the frontline service.
One of the Confederates used was the Williams gun. Boom. The Williams gun was first used in 1862 at the Battle of Seven Pines. It was a rapid-fire cannon operated by a hand crank. The gun was classified as a 1 IB cannon and was designed by Captain D.R. Williams. The barrel was 4 feet long and 1.57 inch caliber. The hand crank opened the sliding breech, which allowed the crew to load a round and cap the primer. As the crank continued, it closed the breech and automatically released the hammer. The effective range was 800 yards, with the maximum range was 2,000 yards. About 40 of these guns were
Start.
About 40 of these guns were made to supply 7 different Confederate factories. At the end of the war, 4 examples of these guns were captured and sent to West Point. West Point Museum retained 1 gun. Other guns were located at Kentucky Military History Museum, the Virginia Museum of Civil War, at the Market. West Point Museum retained 1 gun. Other guns are located at Kentucky Military History Museum, the Virginia. West Point Museum retained 1 gun. Other guns are located at Kentucky Military History Museum, Virginia Museum of Civil War, the New Market Battlefield State Historical Park, and the Waterville Arsenal Museum.